So good morning,
Good morning, Marcella.
Dr. Vermetten. It's such a pleasure to be with you here in Sarajevo.
It's
We're
good to
here.
be here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I know. We spent a couple of days together with a
Mhm.
larger group
Mhm.
at a conference, and maybe a good place to start is just to introduce yourself
Okay,
and your
lovely.
work and where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm Eric Vermetten. I'm trained as a psychiatrist. I'm a professor of psychiatry at the Leiden University Medical Center, which is in an old academic town in the Netherlands. I have been working in the armed forces for about 25 years. I was the head of research, and I retired just a year ago. And I continue my professorship with a focus on, that's been my focus in my career, post-traumatic stress disorder in active duty military personnel and in soldiers after the war or wars or deployments. And that's been my focus of my career.
Mm-hmm. So this is an area that is not very much talked about in Bosnia and Herzegovina or entire former Yugoslavia, I'd dare say. Trauma and coming to terms with our past and the post-traumatic stress disorder at large. It is not even talked about as much as it is in other countries in the world. And yet here we have had a recent war and we have a history of things happening in the region that is not very, very good, and it does leave people traumatized. So there's collective trauma and individual trauma, of course, and many people talk about intergenerational trauma, even ancestral trauma. So this is your field of work, and I'm just curious, and I know you're retired now. I hope that's okay to share. Well, but you keep coming back to Bosnia. What brings you
I do.
back?
Yeah, retired means that when you're age 60 in the Dutch Armed Forces, it's forced retirement. Doesn't mean that your career or your interest or you're not going to continue any professional aspirations. So that's why I continue my professorship and some other work that I do. And one of the things that you addressed nicely is one of the things that brings me here actually to Sarajevo is something that I say discovered but unfolded in a sort of the second half of my military career was the awareness of that we have sent in my career. We were working with deployments. One of the deployments that then hit very much for the Dutch armed forces as well is the one in Srebrenica, where the massacre took place in 1995, where the Dutch soldiers, quote unquote, failed to protect the enclave. And we have a sort of a kind of a moral responsibility that has been there in protecting the enclave. And we feel that we have, there's a wound also on the Dutch side, not in all of the soldiers, but quite many soldiers that I see in my practice were struggling with the aftermath of the war on their end. And one of the things that we have started is bringing soldiers back to Srebrenica, Potocari, and to the area where they were deployed in 1995. And that's a project that I started with now a group to, I wouldn't say reconcile necessarily, but to meet the survivors of the genocide, to not align with the denial of the genocide, and to try to provide memories and to share memories about that horrible period that we can reconcile or that we can have a conversation about. So we bring out of a contingent of 850 potential participants in a journey back to Srebrenica, soldiers to a tour, we call it Back with a Mission, to a tour to revisit the country and to revisit with the mothers of Srebrenica, but also to other survivors of the war. We go to Tuzla, Potocari, Srebrenica, Sarajevo, and meet a lot of people and sit down and share memories. And what you said earlier about that's been in my country as well, denial and avoidance of talking about difficult things is an easy coping strategy. It's an avoidant coping strategy. And I come from a country where we were occupied by the Germans in the Second World War. And it took my country years, maybe 20, 30 years, to come to terms that there were people for whom the war was not over. In a way, the war was going on in their minds and in their hearts. They didn't let the war sit. And that happened also in my parents. And well, we don't talk about that now in particular, but that was something that I felt and that drove me actually to be involved in this field. And I see, I don't want to take many parallels, there's so many differences as well, but that drove me also to bring these soldiers back or the veterans back and try to find a discourse where you can meet and where you can look each other in the eyes and you can share stories. And at the end of the story, you can hug or you can sort of do something together. And that's been a project now that's been going on for 2 years now. And we are going to bring many, many more veterans to Srebrenica. And that's going on until 24, 25, 26 probably. And it's never over, right?
So it's an ongoing project.
It's an ongoing project.
Will continue as long as there's interest to continue.
And what is so nice to talk about with you now, it started as a very small pocket, a pilot pocket, and now we're maturing into something that I feel I can talk about it with you now. And I hope that this will become more known, because the spread of it is enormous and the impact of it is enormous in the current day where we are, right? We're amidst a lot of conflicts, but I think it's so important to keep that dialogue open, to show that we are not afraid, that we're not avoiding, but we're participating in this. And the beauty is we meet now with from an intergenerational perspective of trauma, we're meeting the children of some of the survivors. And some of the veterans bring their own children, and they bring their fathers, and they bring their spouses. And yeah, it's a beautiful group of people and beautiful meetings that are arising from that, let's say, project.
I'm happy is not the right word, but I was just so moved when I heard about this for the first time, because all we hear about in local media is negative, bad stories. And, you know, in this almost a culture of denial, how do you even start to talk about healing?
Yeah.
How do you start to talk about healing as a possibility, different healing modalities? So this is partly why we have gathered here. This whole week, we have people from all over the world. We'll talk about that briefly. But I do want to ask you how the mothers and the genocide survivors are reacting to this, and if you'd be comfortable maybe sharing a story about healing as an expert from the field also, and also somebody who's actively involved and has organized this program.
If you have these from a Dutch perspective, right? If you have these frozen memories of leaving a country where there's the genocide and you feel, I failed my mission. The UN failed, the Dutch government failed, but personally I failed. And I have these nightmares, they're going to be angry with me. And every time the doorbell rings, I think, well, they're going to get me now because I failed. That's this delusional idea that they're feeling they're bad people, and they blow it up. And you can say, like, well, that's a disproportional thought or a dysfunctional thought, but they're trying to survive and they're doing their best. So they're meeting people and they're not angry with them. We share a same story, and to see that discourse that then can be shared has healing properties, has healing qualities. So they always have that backpack that is on their shoulders and they suffer from it. Sometimes the existential guilt is driving them. Some people have stepped out of their lives because they couldn't carry that anymore. So to see then that a conversation can make so much of a change. To meet the memorial center, to meet the mothers, to go to the graveyard, to meet the Snagazene in Tuzla, the mothers, the women's strength, it's beautiful to see. And there are people that recognize each other from those days. It's like, oh, I know you. And then that's very touching. When some people there for 27 years have never heard of each other, and as memories come back of times past, pictures are exchanged of children that were given to the soldiers, and these mothers or some of these people have nothing. They have no memories.
So the soldiers have
they have pictures and they can share the pictures
during the war,
right.
that they
So
have now shared. What?
We met a mother, and one of the veterans had a picture of her son. She had nothing of her son, and by bringing that picture to the mother, it brought a little bit of her son back. And that was so touching. And there was a book about this, about Esmir. And he came to life. And that's just one person, and there's 8,000 and many more. But that is, I think that's beautiful in a way. And that spreads to a wider community. So, and you with your organization, Healing Balkans, is so important at this day and age to kind of facilitate that discourse and facilitate these initiatives, bringing people together. So I'm therefore also very, very glad to make you here.
No, I just, that's a good segue into what we're doing here together with MAPS and people from all over the world, including a large group from Ukraine. Here with mainly therapists and psychiatrists. Can you talk a little bit about MAPS, being that you're now on the board as well and have done work with MAPS for a long, long time?
Yeah, I'm on the board of MAPS Europe.
MAPS Europe, yes.
Not the US.
Of course,
MAPS.
not the US.
Well, it's interesting.
The mother.
And these are parallel trajectories. The one is the back with a mission, but the other one is also interesting from a perspective of innovations in the field of trauma and PTSD. And the work that we're doing here, or why we're here, is same thing. We wanted to bring a compound, which is MDMA, but it's not about MDMA necessarily. Well, the MDMA is a facilitator for work that we can provide to heal stuck processes. And it's beautiful to see that for a while this compound was sort of discredited in a way, or was given a label as toxic and addictive and la. And it's known in the recreational field, but it has many healing properties. And we, with this group, are rediscovering the potential that it has as a medicine. And we're trying to make the ground fertile to bring it to people in need, to bring it to groups of people in need, and organizing ourselves from the Ukraine, as you said, Armenia, Serbia, Poland, Czech,
Poland, Lebanon, the US.
There's a great appetite in the younger generation also. I see. I'm not the older generation, but I try to convey what inspires the younger generation with studies, with organizations, with helping the regulators to make the right decisions to allow us all to bring this to end users. And what I learned so much is when I was in my practice, I feel that we don't do well enough in the opportunities that we have for treatment. And we do our best. We try to do with EMDR, we try to do with cognitive behavioral therapies, but they don't always get there. And with these novel compounds, because we are talking about psychedelics, MDMA is in fact a psychedelic drug, or categorized as. There's other psychedelic drugs that we can, if we use them properly, can make an enormous change in the field of psychotrauma work.
And you are seeing this in the field, in your actual line of work. Can you talk a little bit about the clinical trials that you're working on in the Netherlands and in other places? And also, just, for everyone to know, it is always MDMA, like you said just a moment ago, is a tool or a mechanism. So it is assisting during the course of psychotherapy. It is always coupled with psychotherapy and only used as a tool, of course.
That's
MDMA assisted psychotherapy.
Something we have to frame and to bring into the discourse. Some people think, oh, just take a pill and then you're healed or so. No way. It's a catalyst for work that needs to be done in psychotherapy.
Can you talk just a little bit about this process and what you have seen, and maybe even the efficacy of the treatment with severe trauma and other types of trauma as well?
Yeah, just one step back, if I may, because this is all embedded into the bigger work that we wanted to help to get MDMA registered for the treatment of PTSD, or MDMA-assisted therapy, I should say. And what we have been doing in the Netherlands is an open label, what we call phase 2 trial, as a step up to a phase 3 trial that we were thinking of doing in Europe. So we had 7 sites, and we had the ability or the opportunity to treat 8 patients, with developing an infrastructure in the Netherlands to get going towards the phase 3. And there were 7 sites in Europe that were also going to do a phase 2 trial and then file for registration at the European Medicines Agency. Now that's going to change a little bit. We're hoping that the FDA in the US will approve next year, 24 or so.
Federal
MDMA,
Drug Agency, yes.
Right, the Food and Drug Agency in the US. And that's going to change the landscape, because then we have a compound, a tool ecstasy that was still an illegal drug, approved as a medicine, and then we have to all familiarize ourselves with the potential. But I see that there are many initiatives, like now here in Bosnia, there are also initiatives. Can we step up on that bandwagon? What can we do to contribute? And how can we learn from each other to design a study that can help us to co-regulate it in this country? And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not done tomorrow. It's like we said in the beginning, I would call that normalizing the discourse. We have to teach regulators that it's not toxic, that it's not addictive, and that it's a safe compound. And that's work. And that's not done on one day, but we have to, again, normalize the discourse and then show the efficacy of these studies. And there's a couple of really good papers already about, and these effect sizes are not small in the order of what we typically would see, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 or so. These are in the high order, higher than 1.5, closer to 2. So that's like, wow, you can't, it will be morally unjust to not give that to the proper end users. And that's also what driving me. You can't withhold people who are suffering from an intervention that is not even promising, that is efficacious.
Would you say that it's a fair statement to say that we're seeing some kind of a renaissance when it comes to, or comeback, I should say, because these medicines, plant medicines, have been around for thousands of years in use, but now for treatment of these conditions, they're coming back, and it's a global revival. First question, and then if you can just briefly maybe comment on just the potential of the drug. And, here in Bosnia, it is not even talked about, trauma and PTSD. And we have psychiatrists here from Bosnia, and they say they see people and they suffer. They suffer in silence. They don't ask for self, or they're self-medicating, alcohol, different substances. So also, just the very fact that we're talking about it is, I think, huge. But also, what do you think about the future of this? Where is it go? Where can it go?
Well, we have big aspirations if we let ourselves free think, or mind free float.
Or what would be your kind of vision for?
Well, just one thing that I want to mention here, because I come from a country that was occupied by the Germans. It took us 25 years to come to terms with the fact that there were still people that were still thinking that the war hadn't ended in their minds. And there was a professor at my university, Jan Bastiaans. He was a professor of psychiatry. And we didn't even have a name for PTSD at that time. And he coined the term concentration camp survivor syndrome, concentration camp syndrome. And it wasn't confined to only the people who suffer from the concentration camps, but we had a container, we had a name. And what he did was he treated them with LSD. This was in 72. It was 25 years after the war. So one is we got to terms with the fact that there were still people 25 years after the war that were still struggling after the occupation. And he used LSD. So it's like, that's 50 years ago. And we're revisiting, you're calling it a renaissance, and we're revisiting why it's taken so long for us to revisit these drugs. Because we had other drugs, SSRIs and Valium, that dampen the system, but not providing the cure for the treatment. And now we have, with these compounds, we feel that we're not dampening the system. We have a cure. We have a healing opportunity, because we work through trauma with psychedelics. And when I say that, it sounds as if it's all swift and elegant and easy done. But it's recognizing that it requires a different infrastructure. It requires a different infrastructure. I mean, with the way that we've been thinking about healing trauma was just take a pill and carry on. Just one pill a day for your symptoms or your nightmares, and carry on. And here we have a pill that facilitates work. So what you're suggesting is the denial, and we have to bypass and overcome the collective denial. We have to bypass the avoidance in the system, not only in the individual, but also in the system. So what you're suggesting also is let's sit together and let's have an open dialogue about the impact that we still see and address it. And that requires courage, I would say moral courage to do that. and maybe against mainstream, but that's okay. Okay, we can have that courage, and we can sit down, and we can have that dialogue, and let's not be intimidated.
Yes.
We think
yes.
it's for a good cause. Absolutely. And you know what? You can grow old with cognitive avoidance. You can. And you can carry a whole life with cognitive avoidance, but there's a price you pay for cognitive avoidance. It drains energy.
And not just you, your family, your friends, your community. At the end of the day, the whole country is in a frozen state. It cannot break through because people cannot really take action or react, and they don't feel hopeful. So sometimes we have a unique situation where almost it feels as the whole country is in a frozen state.
And you have to get out of that.
And you have to break through.
You have to break through with ceremonies, with rituals, with things that allow you to hold each other, right? To hold each other and to acknowledge.
And storytelling, which you have been
storytelling.
Talked about.
So the future is, well, we can say the future is good, but there's many conflicts in the whole world. We've got the climate, we've got wars, we've got a lot of stuff, but still we are resilient as people, and we need to build on our resiliency, and we need to be proactive and face adversity. And I think that's what we need to do. And it's not end up in alcoholism and end up in negativity, but try to find positive opportunities, reach out together, reach out to the younger generation, and build solutions. We've got AI, and we can travel the world, and we can do so many things. So yeah, I think we need to relay that message also by facing the difficult situations, but trying to find the positivity in it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vermetten. It's an honor to be in this circle together.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and I hope it's inspiring and incentivizing.
That is the hope. That is the hope, and it's coming from the heart. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.